More than 1 month after the city of Charleston fired the president of its firefighters union, he's taking the city to federal court. John Baker claims he wasn't fired because of misconduct, but because he spoke up about unsafe conditions inside Charleston fire stations and represented firefighters in a previous lawsuit against the city. Live 5's Elijah Brown breaks down what the lawsuit claims and how the city is now responding.
Yeah, the legal battle between Charleston's firefighter union and the city is now escalating once again. Former Charleston Fire Union President John Baker has now filed a federal lawsuit claiming his firing wasn't about inappropriate text messages, but instead in retaliation for speaking on conditions inside fire stations. Now, the 20-page complaint argues Baker was terminated after representing the firefighters union in an earlier lawsuit involving mold, extreme heat, and other alleged safety issues inside city fire stations. Baker claimed city leaders used text messages that surfaced during that lawsuit as a pretext to fire him. Among them, a private off-duty text where Baker used an offensive slur, "towelhead," while discussing air conditioning problems at a fire station, and messages where he encouraged a firefighter to file a grievance. The city said in the termination letter that the content of those messages revealed conduct which was inconsistent and incompatible with Baker's duties as a firefighter. The lawsuit says none of those messages justify termination and instead argues Baker was punished for his work as union president and for advocating on behalf of firefighters. That lawsuit now drawing support from the International Association of Firefighters, and in a statement, 12th District Vice President Walt Dick says across the South, fire department administrators often try to suppress union voices. Firefighters must have the freedom to speak out about unsafe working conditions that put public safety at risk. In the complaint, Baker is asking a judge to order the city to reinstate him, restore his salary and benefits, remove the discipline from his personal life, and award damages for lost wages. Now, we reached out to the city of Charleston, and the spokesperson has declined a comment in relation to pending litigation. Reporting right here in Charleston, Elijah Brown, Live 5 News.